thinking of boats, while we lived in Colorado Springs, we had a house with a nice big basement, and in that basement, I built 3 little teeny kayaks, probably as big as this couch, out of 1/8-inch plywood. Just the cutest little kayaks. The design is called a jam, J-A-M. And I made 3 of them. And I remember we had 2 of them at a lake once on a family camping, and one of them got stolen. That made me think, oh, somebody appreciates it. Then when we moved here to Berkeley, I built another jam. And then I built, I think, 7 canoes. A widow gave me a partially finished rowboat, and I finished that, and I bought a wreck of a rowboat at a garage sale here in Berkeley and fixed that up and sold it. I would buy wrecked El Toros and fix them up and sell them. At one time I had 5 El Toros in the backyard and sold them all at very inexpensive prices. And I found on Craigslist, sometimes you would find somebody says, I've got a free El Toro hull if somebody wants to fix it up. And then other guys would say, I've got an El Toro sail if anybody wants it for free. So a couple of times I got free El Toros just by rebuilding them. And something like 20 years prior, I had bought the plans to a rowboat that I really liked. It was called Shearwater. But I held onto those plans. I was too intimidated to build such a complicated boat, 16-foot double-end rowboat that could be also sailed. But after having built a series of canoes and fixing up other rowboats, I finally worked up enough nerve to build the Shearwater. And much to my surprise, it wasn't as complicated as I had imagined all those years. And it turned out to be a very nice boat. I made my own sails out of Tyvek, and it worked just great. I eventually gave that boat to Ben, grandson Ben, and he fixed it up and painted it, and he's a proud owner now. But then Basin and I started thinking about a bigger build, kind of a family sailboat. Like Basin likes to do, he made a list of priorities that this boat had to have. Be capable of handling the strong winds of the San Francisco Bay. It was a big list. And we started researching designs. And we found a couple we liked, but we ended up with the Cape Cutter 19. Dudley Dix. We paid $500 for the plans. I thought that was a lot of money, but the plans were well done. We got the plans, and I spent several months just going over them and over them and over them and trying to see every detail and figure out what is the sequence of construction, which he had set out very nicely already. And so Basin and I, out here in the backyard, outdoors, began construction of the Cape Cutter 19. And we spent, I think, over 5 years in the construction, but it ended up being a very, very nice boat. I was very happy with the way it turned out. Now, since we finished it, I found that we made several mistakes. When I laminated the keel, I think I put too much pressure. I squeezed all the glue out, so the keel eventually just fell apart. And then the same thing happened with the centerboard trunk. Basin had to go to a lot of trouble to repair those things. We made a couple of minor changes to the plans. Dudley Dix planned a pole right in the middle of the inside of the cabin to hold up the mast. And Basin didn't want that pole to get in the way of the living space, so we laminated a big heavy beam across the roof of the cabin. And then that heavy beam held the mast up. And that's worked out very well. That was one of the things. The other change we made was Dudley Dix had like an anchor well up in the bow. And I thought that was way, way too complicated. So we just made a flat deck. It was much easier, and it worked out very well. Another small change is he had railings on each side of the cockpit, and he made them out of laminated or built-up plywood boxes of a shape. We just made single thickness plywood. So the beam, the foredeck, the combings, we made the openings to the storage areas in the cockpit a slightly different design. That isn't really significant. And we didn't make many changes to the plans. Anybody would recognize it as a Cape Cutter 19 if they knew the boat. We put on a boom gallows, but that's an addition. I don't call that a change. And that's worked out very well for us. I don't know how we could sail that boat without them. And we used brass pieces that I had bought many years prior when I had the Pearson Vanguard. I was going to put boom gallows on it, and I bought those big bronze pieces. At first we thought the bronze pieces were too big for the Cape Cutter, but they seem just right now. It's hard to judge your speed, though, on a small boat like that. Sometimes it looks like it's going pretty fast. Well, in selecting the design for the Cape Cutter 19, one of the criteria was able to sail in the strong San Francisco Bay winds. And she does very well. We can double reef the main and take the jib down and sail just under the staysail. A couple of times you've just sailed with either the jib and no main or staysail and no main. Haven't you done that?
Reaching home.
Yeah. And we have a very nice whisker pole for the jib, but the problem is usually the wind's too strong to put it up. So I'm too old to sail the Lady Joan. Our Cape Cutter is named Lady Joan, which was kind of a family joke. Jonah always used to say, "How come none of our boats are named Lady Joan?" And my answer was, I don't know any ladies named Joan. But at Basin's suggestion, this boat became Lady Joan. And it's still, to this day, down at the Berkeley Marina. I'm too old to sail it. At first I could have sailed it by myself, but now I have a hard time just being a passenger. I had 2 accidents on the very first day of launching. We probably had 20 people going to cheer us on as we launched it the first time. And we went out sailing, turned around, came back into the harbor, and had no control. Couldn't steer. Ran into a boat that was at the dock. Broke the bowsprit, the mast tabernacle. And the reason we couldn't control it is because we forgot to put the centerboard down. We were trying to steer against nothing. So that was a severe lesson. Everybody watched us crash on the first day. And then one day I took Lynn and Anna and another great-granddaughter, Riley, out just for a motorboat ride. And the shear pin broke, no motor, and we ended up on the rocks outside of Berkeley Marina and put a pretty big hole in the hull, which required our pulling the boat out of the water, patching it up, and then Basin took the boat up to Ukiah and did a very nice job of patching that hole. You'd never know it was holed now. So how many times have you taken it across the bay to anchor over by Angel Island and spend the night?
Well, It would be possible to get that number out of the ship's log, but I'm going to say
4 or 5.
Oh, I was going to say a dozen or more.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I've taken it out, I think, a couple times just solo. And Lisa and I have gone out quite a few times.
Yeah, okay. You also took the boat up to Clear Lake.
Lake Tahoe.
Lake Tahoe. We talked about Clear Lake, but yeah, you took it to Lake Tahoe.
And Tamales Bay.
Tamales Bay.
A couple times.
A couple of times to Tamales Bay. Oh, yeah. That's interesting. And you're talking now about taking it up to
Puget Sound.
Up to Puget Sound. Well, that's your story to tell. The Puget Sound and the 7048. Yes, there's 2 major boats in that history that I completely forgot. The kayak was a take-apart. You assemble a wooden frame and then put a naugahyde skin over it. And we used that while you were in the Boy Scouts. And it was way too heavy by today's standards, it would be impossibly heavy. Nobody would even give it a glance. And while you were living at Slide Ranch, I think we were here, Granny and I were here on vacation. We were still living in Colorado, but we came here and spent some time.
1988, we built it.
Is that right? 88. There's a boat designer called Bolger. He's now deceased. And he had a design called Gypsy, a 16-foot plywood rowboat sailboat. We built it on one of the porches of a building at Slide Ranch. And you still have it from 1988 to 2024. But it's not in usable condition anymore. It's falling apart.
How many kayaks do you think you've made altogether? Because you made a bunch and then you made some more.
Well, the only kayaks is the Purple Plum, the too heavy foldable kayak. And then the 4 jams, which really hardly even count as a boat, they're so small. Then I haven't made any other kayaks. Everything else has been canoes. And I'm going to guess I've made 7 or 8 plywood canoes. The designer is a name I can't pronounce, so I'm not going to try. But he published a book, and in the book, he had complete plans and instructions for 3 canoes, a 12-footer, a 14-footer, and a 16-footer. And the plans were just great. And so I made one, and then I made another, and I made another, and I made 14-footers. Then I made a 16-footer, which I gave to one of my sister's kids up in Washington. Then I made another 16-footer, and I gave that to Jeffrey. I gave one to Judy, and I gave one to Janine. There's a third one still in the garage next to Janine's. Oh, and I gave one to Sue. Well, I would guess somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 or 8 canoes. So the Plum, the Gypsy, 3 jams, let's say 7 canoes, probably 7 El Toros, either major repair or minor repair, and maybe 3 rowboats, either repair or major repair.
I remember when we were building Lady Joan, you said that was your 20th hull.
Well, I don't remember that exact number now, but that's probably pretty close. Probably pretty close. And we haven't built one since.
I think you made a couple of boats after Lady Joan and then said, I'm done.
Oh, yes. That's right. It was just getting too difficult. Even the smallest canoe, then that's the one that's in the garage. It's just frustrating me. I'm losing the ability to manipulate small things. And that reflects my philosophy of boat building. It's not several great big giant steps. It's a million little steps.
You've moved to making boat models now rather than boats.
Yeah, but that's small stuff. That's getting hard for me. One of the canoes I sold to a guy up in Sacramento, and he didn't intend to paddle it at all. He was going to hang it from the ceiling of his cabin in Lake Tahoe. It was just, he bought it as an ornament, which I thought was very strange, but it served the purpose, I guess. Yeah, I started making several small model boats, but the real small ones were just too frustrating. So I bought the plans for a, how big is it? About 3.5, 4 feet with this bowsprit for a radio control schooner, which Basin and I recently took out. And then we took all the radio control stuff out and changed the keel. So now it's a decorative piece up at Basin's house in Ukiah. And it looks kind of cute. And that leaves me with a sloop by the same designer, slightly smaller, with a sprit main. And I'm working on that currently. And that will be radio controlled using all the stuff we took out of the other boat. Well, let me tell one last boating story. Janine was down at the marina, maybe just for a bike ride. I don't know why she was down there. But she started talking to some guy, and she pointed out that that boat was built by my brother and my father. And the guy says, I have admired that boat for years. I look at it every chance I get. It's such a neat looking boat. And that made Janine feel so good. And it made me feel good when she told me. Okay, let's call this a day.
All right.
But I call it a good day.
Good.